Welcome back to the channel. In this video, I'm going to be talking to you about the 5 books that have made the biggest difference in my career as an HR professional. Before I get into that, I wanted to do a quick giveaway just to say thank you to everyone who's been providing encouraging feedback to me. So sending me messages on LinkedIn or on Twitter, or writing comments on my videos, or pressing that all important like button and letting me know that you've enjoyed the video. It really means a lot. So what I'd like to do, I'll be talking about my favorite books, but I'd really like to hear from you. What is your favorite career book and why? Write a comment down below. I'll read through the comments and then I'll pick my favorite and I'll get in touch with you and I will organize for a book to be sent to you completely free of charge. Doesn't matter where you are. I know some of you are watching these videos from Russia and Brazil and India and Jamaica and Israel, just to name a few, which completely blows me away. I will send you a book completely free of charge. So let's get into it. So the first book I wanted to talk about is this book here, which is Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. So one of the most common questions that I get asked on LinkedIn is, should I study a Masters of HR? And for me, I chose not to study a Masters of HR, and there's a lot of different reasons which I've covered in a separate video. So I'll include a link in the description so you can watch that if you are struggling with the decision to study a Masters of HR or study something different, or not do postgrad at all. I'm not gonna go into that now. I'm gonna talk to you about this book. When I was studying my master's degree, my Masters of Marketing, it came up quite a lot. It was often referenced. And there's a nice quote on the front here which says, "For marketers, it is among the most important books written in the last 10 years by the Journal of Marketing Research." It is a little bit dated now, but there's a lot of key concepts that you can use in your career, whether you're in finance or IT or HR. But for HR professionals, I think this is particularly relevant. So the book goes through 6 key rules of influence that you can use in order to influence people to make a decision or to listen to your point of view, which is a huge part of what you need to do as an HR professional. A lot of the time as an HR professional, you're going to have limited decision-making power and limited legitimate authority. A lot of the time you will be working with your leaders and influencing them to make a decision based on your advice. There's rarely going to be a situation in which you hold all of the power and you can just decide what an organization is going to do or what your company or department should do. A lot of the time you'll be providing advice and a recommendation, and then the business will make a decision based on that. So this is where this book comes in really handy. So the book goes through 6 rules of influence, which are reciprocation, commitment and consistency, liking, social proof, authority and scarcity. I'm not going to go through all of those rules in detail, but I am going to highlight one which is particularly relevant for HR professionals or anyone who is in a position where they need to influence others to make a decision. So throughout my career as an HR professional, I've been involved in a lot of different change programs. And for those of you who are new to HR or you're still studying HR, a change program is basically where you're trying to introduce a change in an organization. So that might be a change in a way of thinking, so you might be introducing new values, or you might be introducing a new set of leadership behaviors that employees need to use in their day-to-day lives. Or it might be a transformation program, where you're talking to the company and trying to get them to try and do things in a different way, or to cut costs, or completely change the way that they do business. And throughout my career, a lot of the times, a consistent tactic that is used is to get leaders to come up with their own vision and story about why the change means something to them. So you'll get leaders to sit down and put together a brief presentation where they say, these are why these new leadership behaviors mean something to me, or these are why these values mean something to me, or this is how I'm going to apply the change in my life. And then you get those leaders to stand up and present to their teams and talk about how they're going to implement the change. And that is an example of one of the rules of influence that is in this book. There's a whole chapter devoted to it where it talks about commitment and consistency. And basically the theory behind that rule is that when you get someone to stand up and publicly commit to doing something, and especially when you get them to write it down and to talk about it, they're far more likely to behave in line with what they've discussed and what they've written down and what they've presented. So it's a really, really powerful tactic that you can use as an HR professional in order to influence change in the organization. And the book goes into a lot of detail as to why that works and the theory that sits behind it. So that's just one example. Basically, this book helps you to influence change and to change behavior in your organization. If you are struggling with influencing change and getting people to do things differently, highly recommend you pick up this book, Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. Okay, so the next book that I wanted to talk to you about is Show Your Work by Austin Kleon. And if you're watching this video, it's highly likely that you're an HR professional. And rightly or wrongly, HR professionals, they can be a little bit conservative. We can be a bit on the conservative side of things. And I'm not sure where that comes from. It may be due to dealing with rules and policies and legislation that can make us a bit rule conscious, or it might be from a few situations in which we've seen employees maybe share a bit too much on social media, or they've used social media and it hasn't gone well for them, that maybe makes us a little bit reluctant to put ourselves out there. And that's what this book can really help you to get over. So a few years ago, I was similar to what I've just described. I wasn't really confident in sharing my work and putting myself out there. I used to have a lot of thoughts about, will anyone really benefit from this? Do I have enough to offer? Is what I'm sharing worthwhile? And this book has really helped me to get over that way of thinking and to be confident and comfortable putting myself out there, because what I'm sharing might help someone. And so if you are struggling with the concept of creativity, or you're struggling with the idea of sharing what you're doing, and you have self-doubt and you're not sure about whether you should share something and put yourself out there, I highly recommend this book, because it really helped me to get over that fear and that critical thought and that thinking process. So if you are someone who wants to get your thoughts out there, highly recommend that you pick this book up. So I'm not going to go into a lot of detail in terms of what the book covers. It is really short. It's only about 200 pages, and a lot of the pages, they really have like some big graphics and text. There's not a lot of text in there, so you'd be able to read it. I can read it in about an hour, so it doesn't take a long time to read. One of the concepts that I did want to touch on is the concept of attribution and trying to give credit where credit is due and sharing the original source of something. So just wanted to mention that I came across this book on Ali Abdaal's channel, which you've probably seen, but if you haven't, I'll include a link in the description so you can check his channel out. He's been a big inspiration to me and helped me to put myself out there. So I just wanted to give some attribution to him, because that's where I first came across this book. Okay, so the next book on the list is Mastermind, How to Think Like Sherlock Holmes by Maria Konnikova. Before I talk about this book, I wanted to talk about a different book, which is Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And you might be wondering why I'm talking about that book before I talk about this book, but there's a key reason. In the book Thinking Fast and Slow, Daniel Kahneman talks about two different systems of thinking that we have. So there's system one thinking, which is reactive, emotional, it's really quick instinct type thinking. And the second type of thinking, system two, that's more considered, it's more strategic, it considers things in a careful way, looks at all the data, and then comes up with a slow and often more intelligent response. That's system two thinking. And the book Thinking Fast and Slow, it seems to be referenced a lot in the HR community. I've heard about lots of HR managers and trainers and facilitators and org psychs who talk about thinking fast and slow. But every time I talk to them, a lot of them will say, oh, it's a good book, but it's really heavy and I've never finished it. I'm yet to talk to someone who has started Thinking Fast and Slow and completely finished it and read through it. So what I wanted to offer is an alternative to that book, which is this book here, Mastermind. And in this book, Maria Konnikova goes through Sherlock Holmes and Watson, and she uses those two characters and stories from the books to illustrate system one and system two thinking. So system one, the more emotional, reactive type thinking, that is represented by Watson, and system two, the more considered, more deliberate, and analytical type thinking is represented by Sherlock Holmes. And she goes through lots of different cognitive techniques and behaviors and analysis from her studies. She completed a PhD in psychology, and she applies a lot of that research and science to stories in the book. And so it's a really easy way to understand those concepts and to read and learn about them. I read the book a few years ago, and it's one of those books that I continually come back to. It's given me more self-awareness and helped me to understand some biases I have and some ways that I react to things. And it's also helped me to be more creative and more curious. It's one of those really cool books that you come back to time and time again, and you can learn something from it every time you pick it up. It's not a completely magical book which is going to rid you of all of your biases. To be human means that we're going to have biases and we can never completely get rid of them, but you can bring yourself some more self-awareness. And that's what I found this book is particularly helpful to do. And why is this helpful for you as an HR professional? I have found that HR professionals, we are often in a unique position in an organization where we're somewhat removed from certain situations, and we can provide feedback and provide insights to leaders on things that we are observing. And I found that a lot of anecdotes and stories from this book can be really helpful to share with leaders in a less threatening way. So you can talk to them about the book, you can have a bit of a laugh about some of the stories and reference Sherlock Holmes and Watson, but then you can also provide them with analysis and some theory that back up what you're saying and the feedback that you're trying to provide them with. Okay, so the next book that I wanted to talk to you about is this book here, which is Range: How Generalists Thrive in a Specialized World by David Epstein. Before I talk about this book, I wanted to just provide a quick plug for Notion. Obviously this video is not sponsored, but maybe in the future, we'll see. So Notion is a great online platform that you can use basically however you really want to use it. I use it to organize things that I'm reading and projects that I'm working on, and really it just helps me to be more organized in life. If you don't have a system for tracking what you read and what you learn from your books, you're really doing yourself a bit of a disservice. I really wish that I had taken more notes on books that I'd read in the past. So sometimes I'll pick up an old book or I'll open my Kindle and I won't have any highlights or notes in it, and I'm kind of like, ugh, past self, why did you do this to me? So if you want to learn from my mistakes, which is a good way to learn, make sure that you take notes on what you're reading, and then that way when you come back to it later, you can go, oh yeah, that's a good insight. Past self, thanks for helping me out. So if you need a system, I highly recommend Notion, and I have a video where I cover how I read books using Notion, and there's also a free template in there. I also have a more extensive Notion workspace that I'm selling on Gumroad, so I'll include links in the description if you would like to check those out. So back to the book, there's a really nice quote on the front here which says, "An essential read for bosses, parents, coaches, and anyone who cares about improving performance," by Daniel H. Pink. And Daniel H. Pink has also written a lot of other books on motivation, which are helpful for HR professionals to understand how people are motivated and how we can help people to feel more motivated and engaged at work. The last line there, anyone who cares about improving performance. That's really important for us as HR professionals. So that's one reason that you should read the book. The other reason that you should read the book is it really will open your mind to, I guess, a different way of thinking. So I don't know about all of you, but I have traditionally grown up with the idea that in order to achieve greatness in life, you need to specialize early and you need to work hard at things and use deliberate practice and continually work on one thing and really be a specialist in order to achieve great success. And I think that comes from seeing sporting stars or scientists or professors or academics who they just focus on one thing and continually work on that from an early point in their lives. And this book, it really challenges that notion, it challenges that idea. So the book, it really argues that you should try different things and you should sample prior to committing to something. And it provides a lot of different examples, sporting, academic, career, lots of different examples as to people who have been successful when they have not specialized early, but they've tried different things, and that's ultimately led to them being more successful in their ultimate chosen field later in life. And what does this have to do with you as an HR professional? I think that there are two key ways that you can use this book. Firstly, you can use it in your own career as an HR professional, and secondly, you can use it for the advice that you will often provide to employees. So the first one, your own career as an HR professional, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but a lot of HR departments, they tend to have a bit of a problem where HR departments, HR professionals are so busy focusing outwards on helping other people's careers that a lot of the time they fail or they forget to focus on their own employees. So an analogy that I hear quite often from HR employees that I'm coaching or HR people in my network is that HR can be a little bit like the cobbler's shoes. So a cobbler obviously is someone who fixes people's shoes, And everyone has really nice shoes, but then you look at their own and they're not very good because they're spending time focusing on other people. So as an HR professional, you really need to focus on managing your career. And this book will help you, and it will give you insights and ideas on why you shouldn't maybe specialize so early, and how you can have more generalist experience and how you can use that in order to be successful. The second way that you can use this book is to provide advice to your client groups and your employees who often come to you asking for career advice. So one of the most common questions that I get from employees is, should I specialize or should I become a generalist leader? And ultimately that's going to come down to the individual and the career and the industry that they're in. But this book, I've found that it's given me a lot of helpful anecdotes and examples that I can provide to employees that I'm coaching or providing with advice that helps them to think about things in a different way and ultimately make a more considered decision. Okay, so the final book that I wanted to talk about is The Coaching Habit by Michael Bungay-Stanier. And this book is essentially for anyone who wants to get better at coaching. That is often a key part of an HR professional's job, but it will give you ideas that you can use to help coach your leaders to be better coaches themselves. It's really practical and it's really easy to read. So the book goes through 7 key questions that you can use for coaching. So throughout my career, I've seen some HR professionals who have gone above and beyond in terms of the service that they've been providing to their client groups. And whilst this has been done with best intentions, it has been negative for both themselves and for the leaders that they're supporting. A lot of the time they will, do things that the leader should be doing themselves. So they run their team meetings, or they provide negative feedback, or they deliver hard messages that the leaders that they are supporting should be doing themselves. So that style of HR results in the leader not really learning how to do things themselves. And when the HR professional moves on to a different part of the business or leaves the company altogether, then that leader's performance drops. So you're really not teaching them how to be a better leader. So I found this book super helpful as an HR professional to help mitigate doing too much for your client groups. It gives you a lot of different questions that you can ask that will help leaders to solve problems themselves and increase their capability and increase their performance. There's another section in the book that I just wanted to highlight, which talks about the fundamental organizing principle of the brain, which is really around safety. So our brain is constantly looking and scanning a situation. Every 5 seconds or so, we are looking and thinking, is this situation safe? So we prefer to be safe, and when we feel safe, we're able to make better decisions and we're able to use that thinking part of our brain. And this book goes into a lot of detail and provides concepts and questions that you can use in order to help your leaders and employees feel safe. And I think that's really helpful for HR professionals, and it's also helpful for us to use with our leaders to help build better relationships. So the book goes through a lot of different things. I highly recommend that you pick it up. It's really easy to read, and it'll give you a lot of different questions that you can easily use to improve your coaching style and also improve the coaching style of the leaders that you're working with. Okay, so by now you've probably figured out that I like to read books. I'm probably more on the nerdy book reading side of things. I like to take notes as I'm reading. I like to write down my notes in Notion. And if I'm feeling particularly energized, I'll write a book review on my website so that I can share my thoughts with other people and also make sure that I've really learned something from what I'm reading. And I fully understand that some people, they are on the other side of the spectrum where they don't read books at all, or they'll read something and they might scan through it and they don't really apply what they're learning. So the closing thought and challenge that I want to offer to you is how much value you can get from a book. So often a lot of people think, oh, well, I'd really like to work with that coach, or I'd really like to spend just an hour with that high performer or that author to get their thoughts on a particular challenge that I'm going through at work, or I could use their insights to help me to get better at my job and progress my career. I firmly believe that when someone puts together a book, you're really getting a lot of their thinking method, their insights, their methods for success. So I challenge you to think about the value that you can get from reading a book and writing notes about it, and how you can use that in your career. If you are struggling with your career and you're wanting some help as an HR professional, I've put together a series of videos that you can watch that will help you to get better at your career. There's one in particular which I've had lots of feedback from employees saying that they've been able to use the concepts in that video in order to prepare for an interview and ultimately get a better job, which is super pleasing to hear about. So if you do have any of those stories, please let me know. Hope you're having a great day, and I will see you in the next video.